Dark Souls, Elden Ring, Westeros, they're all a match made in hell. Soulsborne games do have a way of breaking even the best of gamers. It takes a certain kind of player to finish them from beginning to end. Game of Thrones, while more grounded in reality, is no less bleak. Only the strongest survive in Westeros, but which iconic characters would survive the world of Soulsborne? And how about a couple who wouldn't? Why don't we talk about it? First up is Sandor Clegane. The Hound is definitely your prototypical strength build. If there was any character in fiction that I can see totally roasting every guy he sees with a katana for playing a dex build, it's definitely Sandor Clegane. The Hound is a ferocious, dangerous, and ruthless warrior. Whether it be for chicken or fighting for the Stark girls, he's shown multiple times that fighting multiple people at once is a specialty of his. He'd fare very well against Ornstein and Smaug, the Demon Princes, one of the 4,000 gang fights in Dark Souls 2. But what about a duel against an equally dangerous opponent? The only reason the most boring and bland character in the show, Brienne of Tarth, beat him was the Hound was practically on death's door from an infection from a bite he got. He is able to stand toe-to-toe with the zombie version of his big brother, the Mountain, who at that point is maybe the most dangerous kind of person thing in Westeros. More importantly, and interestingly, the Hound won't need much of a change of mindset to survive with his way of thinking. How he goes about his day-to-day life in Westeros is exactly how he can survive, and it directly translates to Lodrin, Lothric, the lands between, and so on. It's in his nature to not trust any single person. I don't see him getting kicked off any ledges by Patches. I'd argue the Hound wouldn't just survive in these worlds, he'd thrive in them and become just as notorious as he is in Game of Thrones. His combat ability and mindset are ideal for survival. If you give him any of the powerful weapons that he wouldn't have access to in Westeros that he would likely put it as, armor and a big fucking sword, the Hound may end up being a boss of an area himself. And one who wouldn't is Robert Baratheon. If you're surprised, I totally understand why, because Robert is a huge behemoth of a man, and in his prime, during Robert's rebellion, his fighting skills were unmatched. The Demon of the Trident defeated another highly skilled warrior in Rhaegar Targaryen in single combat. He wielded a warhammer most people couldn't even lift. All of this is massively important for sure, but much like our last entry, that only gets you so far. Listen, we all love Robert Baratheon. He's as relatable as it gets. He loves fighting for his kingdom, but not ruling it. He'd rather get drunk with his boys and bang every woman in Westeros. If this was a ranking of who would be the best hang in the show, he'd easily be number one. But when considering him in his prime and his peak of his powers, he is simply too reckless. Bobby B will fight anything and anyone, and there's a good chance he will win. But do you remember when you were one measly hit away from Moog, the Lord of Blood? You just had to kill him with one more swing, and then you're staring at the death screen because you committed the cardinal sin of the Souls series, greed. Tell me what character you'd think of first who would do something similar. It's easily King Robert. I can throw another scenario at you as well. Say an enemy is strong against strike attacks but very weak to pierce attacks. Do you think for a moment that Robert's going to take out anything but his trusty warhammer? No. Absolutely not, because it's not manly to use what the enemy is weak to. If he wins the fight playing by their rules and not his, it feels like a hollow victory. Like I said, he's pretty relatable. His bromance with Ned ended a Targaryen dynasty that ruled for nearly 300 years. His better half was the more logical side, and with the power of friendship, that might be just a little bit curious, they would survive no question. Robert alone will survive for potentially a good while. But on his own, bro is kind of a dumbass and he's just gonna get reckless. I think even some of the more powerful bosses will be afraid to fight him, and he will get decently far, but he's not gonna last forever. He will meet his end, and it'll be his own fault, quite honestly. The ultimate bro isn't gonna survive, but he'll put up a fight. Our next character who would survive is an obvious one, Bronn of the Blackwater. Without question, Bronn is a great fighter and would more than hold his own against some of the toughest enemies across these games. That's a very good tool to possess, but for Bronn, it would only be a tool. The main reason Bronn survives isn't because of his fighting ability. In Game of Thrones, he's quoted as saying he's a sellsword. He sells a sword. He doesn't have any kind of hero mentality, and he would also be the first to tell you that. A perfect example that you can use is when Tyrion is imprisoned. He needs a champion to fight the Mountain in a trial by combat. Bronn admits it's entirely possible he can beat him, and while Tyrion is a close friend of his, he doesn't take the fight. He weighed the pros and cons and chose not to risk it. This kind of self-awareness about his limitations is the kind of intelligence that you would absolutely need to survive in any of these worlds. Something interesting to think about is what kind of role would Bronn fill in a world like this? He's not outwardly evil, he's not going to invade if he doesn't get any kind of benefit. Maybe a bandit leader like Patches in Elden Ring? I'm not really sure. I'd love to hear what you guys think about some of this stuff. Comment down below. But regardless, Bronn is obvious and maybe the safest bet in the series to survive. He's not going to take a fight he doesn't need to. I think it's safe to assume he's not going to be linking the First Flame anytime soon. No great quests for this guy, and that great fighting ability will mostly just come down to self-defense. And now we come to maybe the most hated character in the entire show, Joffrey Baratheon. But really quick guys, if you are enjoying this video, please consider giving it a like. If you want more videos like this, please consider subscribing as well because I have more Soulsborne videos on the way. Depending on how this is received, who knows, maybe we'll do a part 2 of this or just other crossovers. So if you'd like to help out in another way, leave a comment about which ones you would like to see next. This one I did have more Elden Ring and Dark Souls in mind, but we could also try Sekiro, Bloodborne, what have you. But if you don't do any of these things, I do hope you enjoyed the video regardless, because a lot of work does go into them. I think this little shit is a pretty open and shut case, and honestly is making the list just so we can laugh at the mental image of him dying to the first hollow he sees. Joffrey is mentally weak and a puppet ruler. He has no combat experience or ability to speak of, unless you count getting his ass beat by Arya or running away at the Battle of Blackwater. His sadistic nature would fit the dark fantasy theme, but it would likely just end up getting him killed quicker. Without a strong family to hide behind, Joffrey is mostly just a pathetic little loser, and in this world, he's going to get exactly what he deserves and has coming to him. But what about a character who can not only survive, but also become the main character and hero of our story? And next up for who would survive is none other than the King of the North himself, Jon Snow. Jon is one of the only characters in Game of Thrones who is unequivocally a good person that I can also see surviving. There's one caveat here. People like to say Jon is an average warrior, but that's because they apply Book Jon, where it is true, to Show Jon to try and sound smart and let you know that they read the books. We are going by the show here, where he constantly improves and by season 8 is one of the best swordsmen to ever live. He defeated the Magnar of Then, killed 2 White Walker lieutenants, and went berserk in multiple battles killing dozens of people. If you want to comment telling me I'm wrong, you can go ahead. Congrats on reading, you're so smart. Tell us more about how the books are always better. But I digress. If it hasn't been clear enough, fighting abilities isn't alone what makes characters survive here. And Jon has another X factor, unyielding resolve. As I said in the intro, this is a constant theme of the Souls games. The best example I can come up with is the Hollows of Dark Souls. These are people who lost their will and gave up, and they are essentially zombies. I love that From Software also uses these as symbolism for players that didn't complete the game. And for Jon Snow, that's not going to be an option. He's too strong-willed and in a sense headstrong that's just not going to happen. Jon is dangerous enough as a warrior that he will survive, but his unique combination of a strong moral compass and unbreakable will, he'd be our most likely candidate in this crossover to link the First Flame or become Elden Lord. George R. R. Martin may be a fat lazy fuck, but he built this dark world beautifully, and even better, in my opinion, are his characters. And Jon is a special one. In most universes, he would become the main character, I think. In the worlds of Soulsborne, it's no different. Bronn may survive, the Hound will find himself in a world tailor-made for him to succeed in where others fail. Jon could once again be the hero, and would probably still be a little bit moody and whiny about it. Hey, nobody's perfect. Take for example my YouTube videos, one's on the screen now. Check it out.